Oh shoot. I mean, I kept saying this last time, but I do want to like reiterate, it sounds like a very depressing idea. Especially if you've got some kind of like religious understanding of the world, you're just like, I don't want to reject that kind of hope in my life, right? But you got to remember where the existentialists were, not in this book, but in the 40s and 50s. This would offer them, I think, a little bit of reprieve from dark thoughts. So like 40s and 50s, when like everyone's faith, not everyone's obviously, but like, a vast majority of people have had their faith kind of like at least challenged a little bit. This offered them a way of like seeing the point of life, even if there is no eternal concept of life. And so, that's, I think, part of what made this philosophy like very popular in that time period. But to get back, remember I said that this book has been called by critics quite a few times the first existential novel. So even before existentialism became this like common name in universities, they identified that Dostoevsky is using like a lot of these similar themes. But then other people have read it and said, no, I don't think so. It doesn't quite fit in. There's some things that conflict with that reading of this novel. So, like I said, it's a great idea for us to figure out where we stand. In this class, it's a better idea to figure out where the book stands. So we need to figure out, do we think that this book qualifies as an existential novel? And in order to do that, I think we need to write some like clear questions that would help us answer whether or not the book is an existential novel, right? So like, I want to know, like, does this book believe in God? I want to know, does this book believe in a kind of like universal morality? Remember, because the existentialists were like, you can do whatever you want as long as you understand that you have to take responsibility for each choice. So I want to know, like, does this book believe that individually you can kind of have certain morals, or does this book think that human beings have a kind of morality? I want to say, does this book believe in free will? Because the existentialists certainly do. They believe that you can wake up and you can make choices, and they say keep death in your mind forefront all the time. I love starting class this way in first period. But keep death forefront in your mind at all times, and if you do that, then you are going to understand that you have the freedom to make the choices that you're going to make. Because I mean, you're going to die someday, so make your choices. So they do believe in free will. Does the book believe that Raskolnikov and Sonia and all these characters, do they have free will or agency? Are there any other questions we should ask about the book in order to like figure out if it's an existentialist book? You guys can pull out your existentialist notes to try and figure it out. Right, exactly. Why we take notes. For your prompts one day, I had you do these guiding questions, right? And these are examples of kind of these guiding questions that are going to help us get at the theme of the book. We're not asking what Dostoevsky believes, because I don't know what he believes. I don't know the guy, right? We can read as many biographies as we want. We're not going to actually know that guy, but we can ask what the book seems to put forward in the way that sentences are strung together. That can give us some clues. So what are some other questions we could ask about the book to figure out if it's existentialist? Here's what I'm gonna have you do. Same person you were working with before, come up with one question in addition to these that we can ask to figure out if it's existentialist.
Does this book believe in inherent isolation? Like, you're always alone, there's nothing you can do about it.
Well,
I'd say
Raskolnikov.
part of it is. No, I feel like the book itself is disagreeing with that, because even as Raskolnikov tries to isolate himself from others, the book like tries to make that like seem like a bad thing that he's doing. Like with Rosen or whatever his name is, like he's like, you're not alone. There's always going to be people in your life that are like carrying you, even if you're a murderer.
Yeah.
Which runs counter to existential beliefs.
Yeah. I see that.
Does everybody have their question? Kind of got quiet. Okay, cool. So your group over here, what question should we add to this to figure out if the book is existentialist? Okay, great. Awesome, to make your choices to capitalize on joy. That's sort of what you're leading towards. Because if you're not leading towards heaven or hell, like what are you leading towards? Having a happy life. Yeah. How about you guys, Kayla and Asher? What did you guys say?
Does the book believe in inherent isolation?
Ah,
That was Asher's question.
good. So that kind of concept that the existentialists had about how you can never know another person. It doesn't matter how close you get to that other person, you are still always stuck inside your own consciousness. Does this book believe that's true? Or does this book think that we can actually kind of transcend that isolation and really get to know someone else? Sydney and Jacob, what was your this question?
Ours was like, the book believe that there is no order to do it.
Okay, cool. I'm going to do this. Believe that there is no order to the universe. Is the universe chaos in this book? Universe. Awesome. I think that goes with our God question too, but kind of puts it in more broad terms. Who's working together over here? Christiane and Ethan? Okay, what was your question?
Does the book believe in life?
All right, cool. These two things don't have to be the same. Just because there's no order in the universe doesn't mean that she's meaningless. Let's keep it that way. Doesn't mean that life is meaningless. So those could be separate questions. And then Sammy and Race, what was your, and Unique, what group were you in? Sorry. Oh, okay, cool. All right, and then Sammy.
Joy and isolation were both bars.
I had another one.
They took a, okay.
Does the book show that people avoid or take responsibility for their own actions?
All right, cool. People take responsibility. And I want to say, and that this is a path towards joy, because I want to kind of combine two here. It says to capitalize on joy, so is taking responsibility or the idea of free will a way towards ultimately finding joy in life? Okay, I think these are awesome questions. Here's what you're going to do. Same groups that you were working, partners that you were working with before, you're going to figure out if the book is an existentialist book based on these questions. So choose 3, choose 4. Try and make them a little bit diverse. You know, some of these are very similar. Try and choose from different categories here. So you're going to choose 4 of these questions, and you are going to answer them with direct evidence. This is where your annotations are going to come in handy. You're going to try to find quotations, find passages in the book that answer each of these questions. So ultimately, you'll have at least 4 passages, 1 per question, that speaks to the truth of the book, of that speaks to whether or not the book is existentialist, right? And then ultimately, at the end, so you'll put this on a piece of paper, at the end of the piece of paper, you're going to answer the question. So you'll have the evidence, answer them with direct evidence, and then you'll answer in your own words. All right, only 1 paper per group, but I would like you to write this down so I can kind of see how you're working on it. And I'm gonna give you a few minutes to get started on this, and then I'll come by and visit and see how you're doing. I think this is probably gonna take us about 20 minutes to do 4 of these. That kind of gives you a sense of how carefully I want you to read and try and find that direct evidence. Okay, does anyone have any questions? All right, awesome, go ahead.
Anthropologist fits on the entire page.
All right. I saw that quite a few people were thinking about whether or not the book believed in God. We had people thinking about free will. We have people thinking about the joy question and the responsibility question and the inherent isolation. Like, I think we got all over the board. Did anybody think about this universal morality question? Okay, and then did anyone think about the meaninglessness or no order in the universe question? You guys were thinking about that one. Okay, cool. All right, then that's actually where I want to start with that order in the universe idea. What were you guys thinking with that? Does this book think that there's some kind of order to the universe? Or is the universe just meaningless?
I don't think that it goes along with the growth question,
Okay, cool.
because if you think about it, Sonia doesn't become a prostitute because she wants to, she does it because Martha is in trouble. So if you think about it, everything has a cause and an effect, but it's essentially an endless cycle. So if you think about it, there's a certain order, but it's kind of chaos.
Okay, cool. So it's not that everything is just random and that there is no connection between each other, right? It's like if you set the ball rolling, it's going to roll, and there's laws of friction or whatever that are going to stop it. And there are certain things that are ordering the universe. It's not just completely random, right? But what you're saying here is this kind of like cycle. It's like Sonia doesn't really get free will because she has to react to certain things potentially, and that it's not written into the universe that Marmeladov was a drunk. That seems to be like a bit of a random sort of thing that happened through a series of cause and effects, and we can't like explain it away with some kind of like meaning to the universe. It didn't happen for a reason, right? Because you could look at this book and you could say, oh, God placed Sonia in Raskolnikov's path so that Raskolnikov could achieve, redemption for his actions. And you could look at it that way as having this overarching meaning, but you guys are saying no, right? Okay. Let's look at another spot too, where I think it's kind of dealing with this. Okay, so you could maybe find this in yours, or you could maybe do your best. So I'm in chapter 6 of part 1 for me. And this is when the two, Raskolnikov overhears the two like students over like talking about Lizaveta and the pawnbroker. And by the way, in the papers, I was seeing a little bit of confusion with that. Raskolnikov kills the pawnbroker first, and then he never had planned for killing Lizaveta. He didn't want to kill her. In fact, he was excited that she was going to be out of the house so that he could go and kill the pawnbroker, because he sees Lizaveta as a kind of innocent. But Lizaveta shows up, and so he kills her too.
I always found that fascinating. Like, what moved Raskolnikov to be like, I have to kill this old lady,
Right.
in order to steal from her? Because at first, like, I knew that he was gonna kill someone because I like read the introduction. But like, I thought it was more accidental in the way that he had just been planning to like rob from her, and she happened to be there.
Right.
In a moment of like adrenaline, he kills her. But
Right.
he consciously is like,
He like sews the thing into his jacket,
I'm
right?
gonna kill her today, and I'm gonna steal from her. And I was like, what?
Right. If he actually thinks of this as like doing good for the world by stealing from the rich and giving to the poor kind of idea, although it does seem like he's the poor he's giving to, right?
Yeah.
But he kind of tries to formulate this as a moral choice, then why does he feel the need to kill her? And it
Yeah.
seems like he finds her repugnant for a lot of reasons, like absolutely disgusting. We're gonna look at the violence in this movie, in this book, I think next time. But like he just, along with the book, thinks that she is just like a gross, awful person, right? So it's almost like he has to get rid of the possibility that she could pawn any more people's stuff. Although by pawning stuff, she is helping him out. Like she gives him a bad deal, but who else is going to give him, a couple dollars and then give him the option of getting back his stuff, right? So she serves this purpose, but he just wants to take her out of the world. So he sees her as some sort of force for evil too, I think.
I think and also the idea of like the keys on her, and he needs to get to the key.
Yeah, so it might just be more of like a practical concern that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you admit?
Sammy?
I don't think he fully knows why he killed. her.
I think, yeah, I don't think so either.
Because in the book, he keeps jumping around a lot. It's like, I killed her because I'm superior to everyone and bring justice to the world. And then it's like, I killed her because I'm poor. I need the money. It's
Yeah.
jumping around a lot.
Right, and I think that it's super interesting that before he kills her, he is introduced to someone who is far worse of a person than the pawnbroker too. In the letter from his mom is like, hey, someone basically tried to assault your sister, this guy Svidrigailov, and he still thinks, oh, it's the pawnbroker I have to kill. So if he is fully committed to this idea that great people can kill whoever they want to like make the world a better place, then wouldn't he try to choose the person who is the worst person? But no, he chooses the person that he can take objects from and can get some money for his life. So then, yeah, the motivation becomes totally unclear. And even on one page, sometimes it'll skip around to 4 or 5 different motivations. Like, oh, I killed her because fate made me do it. I killed her because she was disgusting. I killed her because she had money. I killed her because I was in a feverish state. And he can't quite pin down why he did it, which is part of the, I think, his guilt.
Maybe he just decided, like, you know how people
Yeah.
sometimes have, once they decide something, they're just tunnel vision, they're gonna pull through. So maybe he's like decides that he's gonna kill her. That's
Yeah.
just a part of his plan. And now later, all of these excuses and like reasonings for why he did it are like just excuses. when
Absolutely.
in reality, it was just the simple idea of kill her, get the key, go to the city.
Absolutely. And if that is the case, that kind of goes against this being, or that kind of goes with this idea that it's an existential novel, because the novel would be criticizing this rationalization that he's doing. And instead, or existentialism, sorry, I'm having a hard time. Existentialism would criticize him, like trying to find all these reasons and saying, oh, this is why I did it. And here's my overarching story to why I did it. And would instead be saying, you did it. And that is a kind of an idea that there is no order in the universe, but you stuck with this idea that there has to be order. And that's the problem, that you thought there was a path you had to go down.
I was just gonna add to what you said, like, once he decided I wanna do this, he starts like obsessing about it, like, it's the only thing he can think about. Like, he even has the dream, like, with the old gray mare, and like, all the guys trying to kill the mare,
Mm-hmm.
and that starts like putting him into like this feverish state where he doesn't think straight,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah, he has this like, I mean, we can put this in like contemporary, like DSM-5 terms, which is the manual we use for diagnosing people, and say, oh, he has intrusive thoughts, and he has a hyperfixation and he can't get away from that hyperfixation. I don't know, does Raskolnikov have ADHD?
I think he might have like
Maybe.
a bipolar disorder.
Or bipolar, yeah, or schizophrenia. I mean, we could diagnose this guy, I think, with a lot of different things. Audrey, what were you gonna say about it?
I also think it's interesting how one of his biggest motivations is robbing her, and he didn't even do that well.
No.
He was really bad at robbing her. Like, everyone was like, dang, he really just kind of left all this money here and he stole this dumb stuff. He didn't steal all that much. He was very haphazard with actually committing a crime, actually committing it, and like all the thought he put into it,
Yeah.
which was interesting.
And then it's either his guilt or his fear and anxiety that forces him to throw away the stuff too. So it never even has
He doesn't
any
even
purpose.
take it or use it. I'm like,
I think
"Well,
he forgets about it.
You think he forgets, like,
Like-
because it's under the rock, right?
In the moment, he's like, oh, I gotta hide this, I gotta like make sure it's out of the way. And then as he sort of like he focuses on the murder part, and he just kind of like, oh, it's
Yeah.
out of his mind.
Right, yeah, and it kind of seems like you can like the fact that he kind of doesn't, that he robs her so poorly, he tries to justify that after the fact too. It might just be a random thought that he followed through with, like, I don't know what to do with this stuff, I'll bury it, like, I'm not gonna worry about the robbing part, right? But he tries to come up with this whole narrative for why he was so bad at robbing her, where it's like, oh, well, I guess I'm not the extraordinary man, I wasn't able to keep my cool, et cetera, et cetera. And that's part of the problem with him, is that he's trying to fit it into this rationality. But the act of murder itself is not a rational act. It's like in the moment too. It's disgusting, and it's against rationality, like how he's behaving. It's impulsive and weird. Sammy, what were you gonna say?
Doesn't like right before he murders look down on like people who murder haphazardly?
Yeah, he's so judgmental. Yeah. He's like, as long as you have, rationality behind it, as long as you can say why you're doing it and keep your cool, then you can be one of those great men. You can be like
Psychopath.
Napoleon, who goes around and kills all sorts of people in battle, but we see him as a hero. Yeah. Okay, so this part, he's listening to these two students talk about Lizaveta and the pawnbroker, and they're the ones actually who have this idea that fits into his own thoughts about how great men can get away with murder. And one of them says to the other, listen then, on the other hand, you have new young forces running to waste for want of backing, and there are thousands of them all over the place. So basically like young people who have great ideas, but not enough money to make those great ideas happen. 100, 1,000 good actions and promising beginnings might be forwarded and directed aright by the money that the old woman destines for a monastery. Hundreds, perhaps thousands of existences might be set on the right path. Scores of families saved from beggary, from decay, from ruin and corruption, from the lock hospitals, and all with her money. Kill her, take her money, on condition that you dedicate yourself with its help to the service of humanity and the common good. Don't you think that thousands of good deeds will wipe out one little insignificant transgression? For one life taken, thousands saved from corruption and decay. One death and 100 lives in exchange. Why, it's simple arithmetic. What is the life of that stupid, spiteful, consumptive old woman weighed against the common good? No more than the life of a louse or a cockroach. Yet less, indeed, because she's actively harmful. She battens on other people's lives. She is evil. Not long since, she bit Lizaveta's finger out of sheer malice, and it almost had to be amputated. Which, like, a grown adult woman biting her sister? I don't understand who this person is. She's awful in a lot of ways, I think, right? Okay, but were you? This is chapter 6 of part 1. When you listen to that, how can we tell if the book is on their student's side? Like the book is saying, like, yes, she is awful. It would be better for the common good if she were gone. Or is the book on humanity's side saying, like, this is poor reasoning?
I think it's on humanity's side. And so Raskolnikov doesn't do anything with the money. His plans are mostly for like self-fulfillment or like to help his own just family. But the students were talking about sort of like the idea of like giving the money away to people who do need it and
funding small businesses. Yeah.
Not necessarily to kill the old woman, but just to have her money.
But they do say kill her, take her
yeah.
money.
Get rid of her.
Uh-huh.
Because she's mean and she's like bringing down other people's lives. And
Yeah.
just like everyone's lives would be improved, especially her sister's life, if she was out of the picture.
Okay, so then in that way, we see that Raskolnikov is not following what these students sort of envisioned for the death of Lizaveta, right? Raskolnikov ultimately seems to be doing it for more selfish reasons. So the book could be saying like, oh yeah, this would be all well and good if this is how it worked, but Raskolnikov is faulty in his motivations. Or is the book saying that this reasoning is bad, that we shouldn't kill people for the common good? And how can we tell? Yeah, Asher.
I think it's kind of against that reasoning because immediately after he makes that speech, like his friend even just says, well, you won't do it. So like, there's no use to making that reasoning because there's no one who could like take that matter of justice upon themselves.
Yeah.
It's just
Yeah.
what it's saying.
And he calls it a game too. At least in my version, he says, let's have another game. So it's like, you're not going to do this thing. The thought pattern is irrelevant. The reasoning is irrelevant. So don't worry about it. So it's more about like the personal responsibility you'd have to take for that action. Yep. Okay. Any other clues in that passage about whether or not we are supposed to see that as good, solid reasoning, like a good way to live life? Kill the louse and the cockroach so that the common man can have a better life. Sammy?
I think the kind of kill the cockroach, it's saying that it's going to make the world better, but it's also not going to be necessarily noticeable. And I think especially because it's emphasized how she's old and just kind of almost sickly,
Yeah.
that like you can kind of almost infer that she's going to die eventually anyway.
Interesting.
So it almost tries to like push it off as like, oh well, she was gonna die anyway. She basically a cockroach, so get rid of the cockroach sooner.
Yeah, in my version, it uses the word insignificant, that her taking her life would be an insignificant transgression. And then it's like she's a louse or a cockroach. She's like really kind of nothing. But then in the next sentence, like Asher was saying, he says, she doesn't deserve to live, certainly, remarked the officer, but there you are, that's nature. So it's like this idea that it is such a bigger idea than just this one person. So why risk your entire like well-being, the person who has to do the killing, just for this insignificant person? Okay, interesting. All right, so I think in that section, we're kind of introduced to this idea of whether or not rationality, the ability to reason through problems and reason through morality, is a good thing, whether or not it's helpful to the world. And here we're saying kind of at this point, like, not so much. It can be an interesting thought experiment, but ultimately, if one person has to take the blame for killing someone, then the implications are much bigger than just reasoning through it. The pain that that person would feel is so much more significant than getting rid of this one cockroach. I don't think the book likes the pawnbroker, though. I don't think the book feels sympathy
Yeah.
for her. You know, she bit off her sister's finger so that it almost had to be amputated. Like, she's insane. You know, the book isn't lamenting her loss, and I don't even know if it's lamenting the loss of Lizaveta, but it is very interested in the personal guilt that can come when you try to reason through something in this way. All right, let's look at the next passage then. And this passage has to do with its belief in God. So for those of you who thought about the question of whether or not the book believed in God.
Wow, okay, wow. Okay.
All right, so we got 88 and 308. So I'm at the part where he's, you know, in one of his downward spirals. And this is right at the beginning of part 2. And he's thinking about how kind of like messed up he is. This just reminded me of what you guys were saying with like, he had thought only of money. But now like, he's not even using the money. I really must be losing my reason. Like, he's like, I'm losing my mind. And there's this paragraph a couple pages in where he's talking about God. And he says, he's thinking about going and confessing to the police. He says, but why would I do that? He says, oh Lord, at least let it be over soon. He could almost have knelt down and prayed, but he laughed at his own impulse. He must put his trust in himself, not in prayer. He began to dress hurriedly. If I'm done for, I'm done for. It's all one. And then he starts thinking about how to cover up the crime. I'll put the sock on and then I'll walk around with the sock, and the dirt will rub into the blood, and nobody will be able to tell anymore. So, oh Lord, at least let it be over soon. He could almost have knelt down and prayed, but he laughed at his own impulse. He must put his trust in himself, not in prayer. He began to dress hurriedly. If I'm done for, I'm done for. It's all one. So what is his state of mind here? What do you think? And like, by revealing that little interior monologue, it's telling us about a belief in God. Yeah.
Okay, so throughout the book, Raskolnikov scoffs at God. And at this point, he's like, God's not going to be able to help me here. I committed this crime. I gotta like figure out how to do this on my own. And we kind of see his deteriorating mental state where he's trying to handle it by himself, but he's not getting anywhere.
Yeah.
Which then when he turns to Sonia in the end to sort of like bless him, you could see that as him sort of turning and accepting God's role in his life and his need to be forgiven by a higher being. And I think the book, although it never directly says that it believes in God, and Raskolnikov never directly says that he does, like the people who Raskolnikov turns to do believe in God.
Yes.
And they're the ones who help him.
Okay, excellent. I love that word scoffs there, because here, I think that is exactly what he's doing here. He's laughing at his impulse to trust God. He's scoffing at a belief in God here. He's not even scoffing at God because he's like, there is no God. I'm scoffing at myself for even believing in him. Like, how silly is that? Christiane?
I don't think that he necessarily believes in God, but he does believe in some kind of higher power.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it basically turns me out to love that he's not like he's not an atheist, but he also like there's some things about being an atheist like appeal to him.
Yes. What if you had to name something that appeals to him about being an atheist? I mean, in this little passage, I think it's talking about it. What is like so appealing about that? Like getting rid of a belief in God.
I think to him it's free.
Yeah, I think that it is because it's like the ultimate free will. If there's no God telling me what to do or even giving me any impulses or anything, then like I am completely free. It's all me. Like it's a real egotistic, like narcissistic type thing. Like I am the one who gets to make decisions. Sammy?
Is it possible that like kind of Sonia as a whole in a way represents religion? Her character like contradicts a lot, which is very similar to a lot of religions. And then, but at the end is like the saving grace, and especially because Dostoevsky was religious, he was like Orthodox Catholic, which believes in like great. I don't know if they necessarily believe in heaven. They definitely believe in like hell and stuff.
Yes, I think she could be. I think like the way that she is a prostitute with a heart of gold, she's like the kind of Mary Magdalene figure in the book, I think contains that kind of contradiction, and she provides grace because she does get redemption, like because even though she's a sinner, she has faith that she will be saved. I definitely think that's in there. And I think that's in this little section too. Okay, so it says, "Oh Lord, at least let it be over soon." This is kind of like him reacting to the anxiety of committing a murder. There's a bit of an allusion there. Does that remind you of something in the Bible by any chance? Audrey?
Kind of reminds me of like Jesus praying in the
Yes.
garden when he was about to die.
Yes,
Which is
exactly.
something, it's like, please God, please.
Yes, exactly. It's like, let this cup be passed over me or whatever. I always misquote the Bible, so I'll try not to do it here, right? But I think that's exactly the illusion here. And that's his impulse. So he's feeling a ton of pain right now, like anxiety and suffering and guilt and all of that. And his impulse is to turn to God and to take like the position of like the beloved son, right? And like turning to him and saying like, please take this from me, basically. And then immediately he could have almost knelt down and prayed. And I like that it's kneeling down too. What do you think might be significant of that? It's not just like saying a little prayer in your head, it's kneeling. Cindy?
Kneeling and saying a prayer like shows like submission and like showing like that you're humble.
Yeah.
Or Raskolnikov, he has like this idea that very not humble.
Yeah, right.
That like goes against everything that he believes and like what kind of pushed him to commit murder.
Yes, absolutely. Is that what you're gonna say, too, Jacob? So it's like this supplication, it's this submission, like you said, and the kind of humility. He almost, but then he laughs at his own impulse. Now, laughing, I think scoffing is a great word for this, to like scoff at it. Laughter is like the most upsetting thing you can do to authority, I feel. I feel like if I get up here and my students are talking out of turn or throwing things at me or like want to fist fight me, like that doesn't happen at Harriman High, but you know, I hear stories about other schools, then that's one thing. Like I can still believe in my own authority and I can get like angry at that, right? But if I stand up here and my students are laughing at me, not with me, but at me, like that is the most embarrassing, the most undercutting of my authority. I don't know how to handle that. I feel like that's why Gen Z seems so powerful right now, is like they're very good at laughing at people and laughing at authority. Like the reaction to like Afghanistan is like memes, right? You guys are evil. but I feel like that's like his reaction to it, right? It's not to be like, oh man, I'm so stupid or feeling guilty about like believing in God or whatever. He laughs at the belief in God. So like a complete dismissal, and says he must trust in himself, not prayer. So it's like this dismissal of God seems to be like a kind of like very cynical thing to do in this moment, and almost like an evil thing to do in this moment, to like get rid of his own impulses. So it seems like there's two sides to Raskolnikov. There's this side that like impulsively gives money to the poor and wants to pray to God and wants to be humble and submissive in the face of maybe, like Christiane said, like maybe not God, but like something, right? But he wants to be an atheist so bad that his reasonable side of himself, the rational side, says like, no, there is no God. But then he runs into this Sonia person, and Sammy hinted at, and this I'm looking at in mine, it's 308, so it's about the middle. But this is where he confesses. So section 3, part 3, chapter 4. It's the same place where she's talking about kneeling down at the crossroads, I think. No, that's a little bit later. Never mind. It's before that. This is when, and a lot of people actually quoted this in your paper or referenced it. She's saying like, basically, she's like, oh, bad things can't happen. Like nothing bad is going to happen to Katerina Ivanovna. And he says, cannot happen, went on Raskolnikov with a cruel smile. Are you insured against it? So that cruel smile again, like he's laughing at this faith. Are you insured against it? Then what will become of them? The whole lot will be turned into the street. She will cough as she begs and knock her head against the wall as she did today, and the children will cry. She will fall down in the street, be taken to the police, and then to the hospital to die. And the children, oh no, God will not allow it, broke at last from Sonia's overburdened heart. She had listened with an imploring face, with her eyes on him and her hands clasped in silent supplication, as though it all depended on him. And he continues to make fun of her and keeps saying like, well, she's gonna, what if somebody kills her, what if she dies, and she'll probably die on the streets. And Sonia says, no, that can't be, no. Sonia almost shrieked in desperation, as if someone had plunged a knife into her. God will not allow such a terrible thing. Raskolnikov says he lets it happen to others. So that goes back to that question you wrote about for today, the theodicy. Why does he let bad things happen? No, God will protect her. God will protect her, she repeated beside herself. Perhaps God does not exist, answered Raskolnikov with malicious enjoyment. Gen Z. He looked at her. I'm just kidding. He looked at her and laughed. So here's Sonia saying like, nothing bad's going to happen to Karina Ivanovna and her children, Katerina, because God won't let it happen. I have faith. God's not going to let it happen. What happens at the end of this book to Katerina Ivanovna? She dies on the streets, right? She dies of her tuberculosis. God definitely let it happen if Sonia's view of if there is a God in the book. So then what do we make of that? Raskolnikov's laughing at her idea. Her idea ends up being false at the end. She was wrong. God did allow it to happen. So yeah, Christine.
I feel like there's a saving grace in the fact that Sergeyilov ended up taking the children and giving them money in orphanages to make sure that they would like grow up well and have like they'd have a good chance of getting adopted because they have that money.
Right.
And so like I feel like it's a mix of the two ideas.
Yeah, so it's like maybe your full faith in God to save everyone was misplaced, but there is that saving grace there. There is that hope. You just didn't know what it was. Grace?
Maybe in the book that's God's way of kind of freeing her, because it kind of cuts her financial burden to the children. And then God kills off Katerina.
Yeah.
Which like Sonia cares about Katerina, but in a way it's freeing her from her
Obligations.
Kind of
Like,
debt
yeah.
And in a way, it's kind of repaying her for punishing herself.
Okay, so here you're saying that the book might not believe that God is fully like kind to everyone, right? Because if he's just going to kill off Katerina to save Sonia, it's like this idea that yeah, maybe there is a God in the book and things work out, but for the chosen ones. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And that maybe Sonia, through her humility, like ironically, doesn't think of herself as a chosen one, but through the humility has created herself as a chosen one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Asher.
I feel like it could be spun either way. It could be like that God is like blessing them because then like her children end up fine, they have money to go on, or it could be just like other existential thing, like the world may not care, but people do.
Yeah, tell me more about that idea.
Like the world, God didn't save you, just random dude did. People save other people, not any religious thing.
Yeah. So, but it seems that like in this scene, we still admire Sonia for having faith in something bigger than just herself, but it's maybe in the wrong thing. Like, maybe there isn't a God, but at least it's in something bigger than herself. And you're saying it should have been people, but that's okay, kind of a thing.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, Kel.
I think maybe Katerina's death was sort of like a sort of peaceful end for her. Like she had all these burdens on her. She was, I don't even know if she was working at the time, but I bet she was like selling stuff and trying her hardest to like save money. And you could kind of tell when she would ever talk about her past life, and she was like, my father was this great and important man, and just all of that. Maybe like her finally dying would just relieve her of the burden.
Okay, so kind of like Marmeladov too.
Yeah.
All right, so then there's this idea that maybe there is kind of an eternal
A mercy.
quality to the book, and so death can be a mercy. Okay, but either way, no matter how we're reading this, it sounds like all of you guys are saying like part of the God in this novel, if there is a God in this novel, then God is unknowable. You can't you can have faith in God and faith that things will turn out, but Sonia's mistake here, maybe the thing that Raskolnikov maybe can laugh at legitimately is her thinking that she knows how God is going to work, that God will save, the people around her in a certain way that she feels like in her life, that's going to make the most sense to her. And to me, it's a little bit like that beginning passage where the students are like, oh, we know best because we can do this thought experiment about killing bad people and then it'll save the most good. And that is the most rational way to live in this world. Get rid of the bad people, the good people can flourish. That sounds like a good idea, right? Rationally. Here, Sonia's like, my belief in God, or her belief in God is based on faith, right? But she is applying her rationality to the world still and saying like, this is the way that the world will become good by Katerina and her children being saved in this particular way. But Race and other people here are saying like, that doesn't need to be the way that God performs. Sydney and then to Audrey.
So there was just one thing that I noticed, that one, I think he was a French philosopher that we talked about last time. Like, so he was an existentialist philosopher, and like one of his big things was blind faith.
Yeah,
which
Kierkegaard.
Which is a lot of what we've been talking about. It's like they have faith in something, they just don't really know exactly what.
Yes, and in this book, that feels like something to praise. Like it's good to not know exactly what. It's good to not try to put thoughts into God's head, like to impose your human rationality on how God acts. Audrey?
I think it's also just like in the book thinks that God works in mysterious ways, that very popular phrase. But also like it did kind of turn out well for Katerina and the children that she died, but one of Sonia's big worries about Katerina dying was the children being homeless and Monika having become a prostitute also.
Yeah.
Svidrigailov kind of saved them from that fate, which in a way is kind of like maybe God was working mysteriously.
Right. Through a pedophile.
Yeah.
Which is like, yes, exactly. I mean, exactly. You would never expect that way of working, you know? Yeah, Remy.
Kind of, as we were trying to find quotes for this, we used the one where he like kissed the earth and whatnot, and then right after that it says he's going to Jerusalem, and Jerusalem is always seen as like the Holy Land throughout history and whatnot. And so, and then as I searched up Jerusalem again on this PDF, it mentioned that it brings to this part where I don't know who Raskolnikov was talking to, but it says Raskolnikov believes in the New Jerusalem, and then he's asked, "Do you believe in God?" And Raskolnikov says, "I do." And it says, "Do you believe in Lazarus rising from the dead?" And Raskolnikov says, "I do." And so it's like this: they may not believe in like an overarching God, like is there to intervene when he wants to, but it's that God was there, like biblical times and whatnot, I guess, with like Jerusalem and Lazarus and whatnot. But he could still be there now, but he's like taking a step back and let people do their own like work.
Yeah, good. So people would still have to take responsibility for their own actions. This can still be true with a God too, maybe a more hands-off God. Yeah, okay. Sammy.
I don't know who Remy said. I think something that's really interesting is Jerusalem always has like an uncertainty to it because like especially what we've been seeing in the news right now with like Israel and Palestine. But like throughout history, Jerusalem has always been fought over between like many almost all religions
Yeah.
and stuff. Because you have like because Jews see it especially as a holy land, the Western Wall. I think some Christians see it, and then Muslims, I think. And with all that uncertainty about religion, brings up fighting too.
Yes, okay, so how does that apply to what Raskolnikov is
He's
experiencing in that moment?
uncertain about his religion to an extent, and that leads to fighting.
Okay, all right. I love ending there because next time we're going to try and solve this issue. Because I think we're still sort of like, does it or does it not? I don't know if there's a God in this book, by looking very carefully at the epilogue. So there's a prompt for next time as usual, but that is all you need to worry about. Oh, and I want your papers. Yes, on your way out, will you just drop that in the top drawer, your group's thoughts over there so I can take a look?